achieved.
Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson, and on this episode of the show, we're breaking down the upcoming UFC on Fox 14 event, which will take place live from Stockholm, Sweden, and feature a 4-fight main card, including a massive light heavyweight title fight, pretty much a number one contenders bout, as Alexander Gustafsson takes on Anthony Rumble Johnson. I'll be giving you my 4 main card predictions on this episode of the show. All of my preliminary predictions will be available at the new and improved KamikazeOverdrive.net. Now, as you've probably noticed, if you're a regular viewer of my website, I've certainly made some changes and some upgrades. I've added, I think it's it's a bar, and I put on all the UFC, the updated schedule, and all you have to do is hover over January. You can see the different events. If you hover over the event poster will come up. You can see what my record is, and of course past events, you'll be able to click on them and go directly to the post-fight review. I think it's a pretty cool function, and certainly take advantage of that. I'm looking to upgrade and make new features on my website. Also, I'm still looking for a predictor who'd be interested in predicting Bellator fights. I've had guys do it in the past, and they try and do the UFC and Bellator, and it's just too much. So I'm looking for someone who will solely do Bellator. So if you're interested, please contact me at kamikazeoverdrive@live.ca, or leave a comment in the YouTube post, and I will contact you through there. Now, I'm coming off a very strong showing at UFC Fight Night 59, where I went 11-1 overall. Now, it was one of those cards that had a lot of tight fights as far as the odds were concerned. Most of my predictors, I think all 3 of my predictors on the panel did exceptionally well as well. So 11-1, certainly not shocking. Honestly, I should have gone 12-0, and it's actually, it's making me very angry, as my only loss was Sean Spencer losing to Cathal Pendred. I was very disappointed. I know the Cowboy Cerrone Henderson fight was a little bit controversial as far as the decision was concerned, but I really felt, and I think it's indefensible on the judges' parts, first of all, to give Cathal, 2 of them gave Cathal that opening round where it was almost finished, and I thought Spencer boxed him up in the first and second round. I thought Cathal was probably doing enough in the third just with activity to steal that round, but I thought that was a pretty clear-cut Spencer fight. I turned my back on the TV and put my hand in the air as I was walking away when I heard the 30-27s. I thought, there we go. That fight in the end personally ended up costing me almost $4,000 in winnings, which was pretty rough, because Spencer was one of my betting key fights. Now, as far as the betting packs were concerned, I think I pulled in about $600 in winnings. Had Spencer pulled off the victory, it would have been close to another $1,500, I think, just doing a rough calculation. So it's a pretty decent sized amount of cash lost by incompetence on the judges' parts. Either way, it's gambling. You win, you lose. Don't let it go to the judges. But then again, they're professionals. You should be able to win that fight by going to the judges and feel confident you did enough, especially in Sean Spencer's case. Hopefully the UFC handles it accordingly. But that pack's doing well again, still kicking out winnings. I made some changes, made some upgrades. I've made the new betting scenario section, which that information will only be privy now to my bet pack customers. I will not be posting in the post-fight review, as I think it's something that's, it's something I've worked very hard, and if you're paying for the bet pack, you should have exclusive access to that. 4 main card fights. Let's get to the first one. Our first fight of the night takes place in the UFC's featherweight division as Akira Corassani, 14-6-1, battles 13-5-0 Sam Sicilia. Now, both fighters are tough alumni, different seasons, but still the same routes to get into the Ultimate Fighting Championships. Now, Corassani is fighting at home in Sweden, which certainly is an advantage, but so far he's 1-1 when the UFC travels to the Nordic nation, losing to Max Holloway in his last fight and pulling off an upset over Robbie Peralta in his first trip home. For Sicilia, fighting in enemy territory, certainly not something new, so he's got some experience there. He fought in Brazil twice against Brazilians, going 1-1, and he also fought in Japan against a local, losing that matchup. For Corassani, he's taking a major step back in competition after taking a couple big-name fights unsuccessfully, losing to Max Holloway and Dustin Poirier in his last 2 bouts, and certainly Sam Sicilia has stepped down from those 2 individuals. Now, looking at this fight, there's some very scary numbers from a prediction standpoint, which really makes it difficult. As far as striking is concerned, both guys get hit more than they land, which is difficult when you consider how striking-oriented these guys can be. Corassani over 5 strikes absorbed per minute versus just shy of 3.5 strikes landed per minute. Now, those numbers are inflated by his last 2 matchups, but still that's a lot of damage to be taking. For Sicilia, 3.14 strikes landed per minute versus 3.65 absorbed, so not nearly as ghastly as Corassani's, but still considering, it's a negative exchange rate. Also, 37% striking accuracy for Sicilia, which shows he does a lot of swinging and missing, which can and it does tax his cardio. Continue with the nightmarish numbers. Corassani 1-7 in fights ended by knockout. Both losses in the both his losses in the UFC were by KO, coming against the two aforementioned gentlemen I talked about. He was also hurt quite badly in the disqualification against Maximo Blanco, nearly put away prior to I believe it was an illegal knee. So the big question is here, is Sicilia throws very hard, can Sammy test his chin? He does have 2 UFC knockouts on his resume, but they were against below-average strikers in both those wins. Now, Corassani certainly is not all bad news. He's fought power strikers before with success. He fought and upset Robbie Peralta, as I mentioned. He shut down his power striking game with a much more technical approach. Lots of side-to-side movement and feints to shut down what Peralta likes to do, rush forward and put it on guys. He's been working with Frankie Edgar's boxing coach, I believe, and you can really see that in his improved footwork. We also saw in the Dustin Poirier fight in that first round. He had a lot of success despite how it turned out, and he was able to hurt Poirier with a couple of shots and really back him off. He does have a Taekwondo purple belt, so he could mix in some kicks as well. He uses very good angles when attacking, and he needs to avoid brawling and giving Sicilia a chance to land that shot. When he hurt Robbie Peralta, who's known for having a pretty solid chin, but going back to the fight, as well as he fought throughout that matchup, Peralta still almost knocked him out at one point and really had him in a lot of trouble. And that's the big thing, is if Sicilia can turn the tide with one shot, all his success could be for naught. Now, Corassani does a nice job of mixing in his wrestling where appropriate. Some good trip takedowns, body lock takedowns as well. BJJ purple belt, and he does have 3 wins by submission. For Sammy Sicilia, he does have power. He needs to turn this fight into a brawl, though, for him to be able to deploy it successfully. He throws a lot of looping hooks. He does have some hard leg kicks. He tends to put his hands down and duck his head, which means his accuracy, as I mentioned already, is going to be less than it should be. Doesn't use a lot of setup. He's trying to work on his combinations, but he tends to, it's the Leonard Garcia factor, where when things break down, you go back to what you know, and that's just throwing strikes and hoping they land. Now, Sicilia has used his wrestling before, but he's also been submitted several times, and I don't think it's someplace he really wants to take Akira to unless he, can really get an advantage or hurts him first. Cardio is also a bit of a question mark for Sicilia, and he will slow down because, as I mentioned, he throws a lot of hard swinging punches. He has big KO. The big KO numbers are very concerning for Corassani, and if Sam can land, that's pretty significant. He does only have one. Sicilia only has one knockout loss in his own part, but he's been through some wars, and I think his chin and his body are starting to deteriorate a little bit, and he's shown signs of weakening of late. I think Akira is going to be more diverse. He's going to use more movement. I think Sicilia will eventually slow down, and the chance of him landing that one home run shot will diminish. He'll swing for the fences. It's hard to find success with that method. And Akira overall is 7-0 decision, so he knows how to put up, win fights that go to the distance. My prediction is Akira Corassani to defeat Sam Sicilia by decision. The next fight takes place in the UFC's light heavyweight division. It's the number 5 ranked Phil Mr. Wonderful Davis, 13-2-0 with 1 no contest, takes in the number 7th ranked Ryan Darth Bader with a record of 19 wins and just 4 defeats. Now, the winner of this matchup takes a massive step towards a possible future title shot, or at least gaining some more traction within the division. Obviously, the winner of this will still be a step behind Alexander Gustafsson, Cormier, Rumble Johnson, and Rashad Evans, but still it's a big step in the right direction. Now, Bader did fight Jones in Jones' last non-title fight and was submitted, but both fighters, Bader's come a long way since then. I'm not saying he's going to challenge Jones anytime soon, but at least he needs a win here to keep that dream alive. Now, what we have here is a wrestler versus a wrestler. Both guys NCAA Division I wrestlers. Bader was at Arizona State. Phil Davis was at Penn State. And frequently, what we get when wrestlers go head-to-head is we get a striking heavy matchup. But nonetheless, let's look at the grappling first and the wrestling skills. Davis has averaged 3.02 takedowns with a 39% completion rate, which is a little bit low for a guy as talented as he is. 73% takedown defense, telling us how hard he is to take down. And he's put up some good numbers against opposition that are traditionally hard to take down. He's coming off a 9 takedown performance against Glover Teixeira. He also took down Lyoto Machida a couple of times. We know how difficult that is, even though 2 doesn't sound that impressive. Now, his last 2 losses against Rumble and Rashad Evans, saw him struggle with his takedown success. He went 2 for 9 against Evans, while Rashad landed 3 of his 4 attempts, and he didn't land a single attempt against Rumble Johnson, and it showed how one-dimensional he really is, or at least how diminished his arsenal is when his wrestling cannot be incorporated in. Now, for Ryan Bader, 3.84 takedowns at a 44% completion rate, a little more impressive there. 57% takedown defense, 9 takedowns versus OSP in his last victory, 7 versus Rafael Feijão, so very takedown-heavy approaches. He was taken down a couple of times by OSP, but he probably hasn't faced, if you look at things though overall, his numbers are better, but he probably hasn't faced that good of wrestlers over his run since facing the champion Bones Jones. Now you look at Bader's numbers as well, 0 takedowns in his 4 UFC losses, while he's landed 39 in his 11 wins. So it shows you again how reliant he is on the takedown game. So while I say it could be a striking heavy game, if the striking is close, whoever could land that key takedown could be the winner in this matchup. Now, Davis has better takedown defense overall from what I've seen, and he appears to be a more athletic fighter. I'd say he also had the more accomplished collegiate wrestling career, and he beat Ryan Bader in a college wrestling match, I think it was 2007, 2008, right before he won his national title. So he has that psychological edge, and certainly that could give him an edge in this matchup. Now, Davis seems to be a little more affected when he can't get his wrestling involved because Ryan Bader has shown he has a better striking arsenal. He does have 6 wins by knockout, but he's knocked out some low-level guys in the UFC. Keith Jardine, Jason Brills, Vinny Magalesh, none of which are employed by the company anymore. He does have a big right hand if he can land it. He's been improving his boxing, working on his footwork, but he still leans heavily on his wrestling, as we've seen in the last couple of fights, and he has been KO'd twice, which tells us his chin's a little bit iffy if somebody can land. But again, Phil Davis not known for his ability to put guys out on the feet. What Phil will have in his corner, he'll have a 5-inch reach advantage, not a ton of striking power, only 2 wins by knockout, and they came both very early in his pro career. He does have some solid leg kicks, arguably his best weapon in his arsenal, and his jab is pretty effective as well. He's still looking to improve his striking, and he's training with Alexander Gustafsson over at Alliance, so that's going to give him an advantage as far as rounding out his striking skills. But again, wrestling has still been his best weapon. I would think Davis should have a speed advantage, and the movement advantage as well will give him the ability to avoid a lot of what Bader throws on the feet. He's fairly light and moves very well, able to get around the outside of the cage and use that speed. And I think it's going to, as I said, limit what Bader can do offensively. The Rumble loss was a massive step back, and he showed much more improvement against Teixeira. Again, if he can't get this fight to the ground and Bader outclasses him on the feet, it's pretty elementary who's going to take this home. Bader, though, is not as talented as Rumble Johnson or Rashad Evans on the feet. I think that shows up here. I think the striking exchanges could be very close, but the reach, kicking arsenal, and footwork of Davis could give him a slight edge and force Bader to take some chances, which will put him in awkward positions. I think he had some trouble against John Jones, Leo Machida closing the distance. I think Davis is not on the striking level, but again, when Bader gets desperate, he makes mistakes. Davis should be able to score a few key takedowns, I think, fend off what Bader offers him, and if Bader gets put on his back, that's going to be a massive advantage for Phil, as wrestlers don't like being put there. This fight could be close, but I've got Phil Davis defeating Ryan Bader by decision. In the co-main event of the evening, we're in the UFC's middleweight division, is Dan Henderson, 30-12-0, battles the number 8th ranked Gegard Mousasi with a record of 35 wins, 5 losses, and 2 draws. Now, this is a battle of former Strikeforce light heavyweight champions. They were kind of the bookends to the best time in the Strikeforce light heavyweight title history, with Dan Gegard Mousasi taking out Renato Babalu to start the title run, and then Dan kind of ending it when he defeated Rafael Feijão, and then eventually leaving to the UFC. Now, this is Henderson's return to middleweight, and he hasn't fought at 185 pounds since his 2010 loss to Jake Shields back in Strikeforce, so that's a red flag we're going to readdress shortly. For Henderson, he's struggling of late. 1-4 in his last 5 fights. He easily could be 0-5 until he caught Shogun with that shot and knocked him out. For Mousasi, he's 2-2 since coming over to the UFC. His big win, and he looked very good against Mark Munoz, but he has struggled since. Even in his win over Ilir Latifi at light heavyweight, he didn't look overly fantastic. Mousasi's going to have a 1-inch height advantage, 2-inch reach advantage, but with Dan, I think he's much shorter than. I don't think he's 6'1". A lot of those websites will give him that height. I think Mousasi could have a couple inches of height in this matchup. Now, for Mousasi, he's a very good kickboxer with an improving grappling game. For Henderson, he's a top-level wrestler with the H-bomb and ability to knock anybody out if he can land. For Mousasi, 18 wins by knockout. Henderson almost equally as impressive with 14 wins by knockout. Now, Mousasi's never been KO'd. Dan Henderson has been knocked out just the one time. For Mousasi, additionally, he's also 12-3 in fights ended by submission, while the veteran Henderson 2-4, far less impressive there. And Dan hasn't utilized his wrestling to set up his submissions over his career. It really hasn't been a focus, and that's why his record is so poor in that situation. Now, Dan's wrestling, it hasn't been a major weapon overall in a long time. If you look back at his fights, in his last 7 matchups, he's lost a takedown battle by a count of 10-2, which for a high-level wrestler like him should never happen over that long of a time period. For Gegard Mousasi, a 56% takedown defense. He has cleaned up his takedown defense, going back to losing his Strikeforce title to King Mo. That cost him. He's had some other issues in the Keith Jardine fight. A long time has passed since then. Henderson, unfortunately, his ability to put guys in the ground, while it's there, it just isn't consistent enough to count on in this fight. I think this fight will be decided on the feet, and in that match, in that scenario, we have Dan's H-bomb. The question is, can he land it, as he has really struggled with better strikers, superior, more technical strikers in the past. He has been outlanded in every fight since he defeated Fedor Emelianenko. He averages 2.38 strikes landed per minute, gives up 2.55, which is, again, with the power quotient usually favoring him, that's big, but if he can't land, it certainly costs him. For Mousasi, 3.41 strikes landed per minute, just over 1.15 strikes absorbed. He's so good at eliminating his opponents. He outlanded Lyoto Machida despite losing that matchup in overall strikes. Not significant strikes, but overall strikes. He does an excellent job of limiting damage, and I think Dan's going to struggle to land. Mousasi simply is the more diverse striker. He has a reach advantage. That jab is very effective at keeping guys at range. The kicking arsenal is also an issue there. I think he'll have a massive speed advantage over Henderson as well. The big thing with Dan is that chin. He has been knocked out just one time, and it was once considered a granite chin, but that appears to be gone. He was KO'd by Vitor Belfort, and he was hurt a couple of times in the Shogun fight. I think it's a major issue, and I think Mousasi is more than capable of knocking him out. Also, the cardio of Dan Henderson has to be an issue here as well. He gassed hard in his last middleweight bout. He was 39 when he fought that time. Now he's 44. I think the cut's going to be harder on his body. Fighting away from home is also a difficult place to be making such a big cut and a return to a division that requires you to drop 20 pounds from where you previously fought. Mousasi doesn't push a torrid pace, but I think he keeps the pressure on enough to slow Dan down after maybe the first round. Dan has a puncher's chance if he can land that H-bomb or catch Mousasi like he did with Shogun. Mousasi has an excellent chin. I think Gegard has way too many weapons here, and my prediction is Gegard Mousasi to defeat Dan Henderson by TKO. We move now to the main event of the evening, and it's the UFC's light heavyweight division as the number 1 ranked former title challenger Alexander the Mauler Gustafsson battles the number 3 ranked Anthony Rumble Johnson. Gustafsson with a record of 16-2, Johnson with a record of 18-4. It's interesting to note when you look at the UFC's website where they compare the fighters, their actual pictures of them. We still have the welterweight Rumble Johnson next to the Alexander Gustafsson. It's really quite crazy to consider how far Johnson has come as far as coming from 170 up to 205. Now, the winner of this fight most likely gets the next title shot at John Jones. Gus wants that rematch, and Johnson just wants an opportunity to fight for the title and really come full circle from where after he'd been kicked out of the UFC. Now, Anthony Rumble Johnson's coming off a 6-month layoff after he was suspended, so certainly that's a point of interest. It's not a massive layoff, but it's a little bit longer than I think most guys would like to be fighting off of. Now, both could fight for the title by year's end, but obviously the winner of this should be next in line. Now, Gustafsson fighting in Sweden, he's fighting at home, which is huge. But Johnson does have a win over Gus's training partner and Phil Davis. They train out of Alliance together. That's a big advantage, but at the same time, that gives Davis the opportunity to give Gus some insight into what Johnson brings to the table. And, that's huge. Also, on the other side of things, Johnson, he trains with Rashad Evans, so these guys are training with elite-level heavyweights, and as Joe Rogan likes to point out, steel sharpens steel, so that certainly these guys are in the right places where they need to be. Physically, Gus will be 3 inches taller, but Johnson will be the one with a 2-inch reach advantage. Now, this fight, I expect it to be decided on the feet, but we could see the ground action a little bit. Johnson's a former junior college wrestling champion, and we've seen Gustafsson's ground game improve leaps and bounds. We saw him utilize it very effectively in the first round against Jimmy Manawa in his last fight. And, Gus could look to use his takedowns to wear Rumble Johnson down and at least make him think about a secondary attack and keep him from being as aggressive. But again, we saw Phil Davis routinely attempt that, and it did not hash out the way he had planned. Both guys average in the mid-2s for takedowns per fight and have a mid-80% takedown defense, which is pretty darn impressive. And again, I don't think this is going to be a major issue unless there's a knockdown or a slip and one guy's able to jump on top. But I could be surprised. Of the two, I would think Gustafsson would be the more likely to look for a takedown. On the feet, both guys have massive power. Johnson, 12 wins by knockout, 5 since moving to light heavyweight. Gustafsson, 10 wins by knockout. Neither of these guys have really any official KO losses, or at least legitimate. The only one on either one's record is Anthony Johnson's eye poke loss to Kevin Burns, which was an absolute joke, which he has since revenged. Now, in natural power, I think I give the edge to Rumble Johnson here. But the question is, who deploys their arsenal better? And, you can have all the power in the world. If you can't land it, it doesn't really matter. Johnson throws hard combinations. He mixes in his uppercut exceptionally well. He has an exceptionally hard kicking game as well, going both the legs, body, and head, all 3 of those locations. And he does a good job as far as variety is concerned of mixing things up. He likes to fight at close range. He doesn't want to work on the outside and pick away at guys. He wants to get in and swing for the fences, but he still sets his strikes up very effectively. He'll walk down opponents, keeps the pressure on, keeps them backing up, and that's when he is at his best. When Phil Davis tried to take him down, he routinely looked to counter with an uppercut, slip it in, and also when Davis did get in get a hold of his legs, Johnson would sprawl out and transition immediately to attack and punish and make him think twice about attempting that again. Also, keep in mind his cardio looked fantastic against Phil Phil Davis going a full 3 rounds in a fairly physically taxing matchup that he still came out looking very good in. For Gustafsson, very good combinations on the feet. He's a very busy striker. He changes levels, going to the head and the body all over the place very well. He throws a nice left jab. He'll double and triple it up sometimes. And we saw with that Jimmy Manuwa fight, when he did get in close, he's very effective. He landed a knee that eventually led to the knockout. Gustafsson, though, he likes to fight on the outside, work in and out, lots of movement. He routinely slipped away from the kicks of Jimmy Manuwa in that matchup, and it really does a nice job of limiting his opponent's ability to land those big strikes. He gets excellent extension on his punches, while Johnson, again, as I mentioned, wants to be at closer range, and Gustafsson needs to take that away. The experience for Gustafsson of going 5 rounds with John Jones cannot be underestimated here. Not just 5 rounds, he went 5 competitive rounds, very impressive, nearly won the title. That goes a long way. Johnson has never gone 5 rounds in his career, and this is easily the biggest talent he has faced since moving to 205 pounds. You look at Phil Davis, he's primarily a wrestler. Little Nog is way past his prime, unfortunately. Gustafsson is in his prime. This is a big fight for Anthony Johnson as far as stepping up in competition, where Gustafsson has fought some pretty solid talent. John Jones is all you need to say as far as that is concerned. Gustafsson should have the speed advantage. He should have the cardio advantage as well. And while Rumble Johnson hits very hard, Gus cannot get careless and think he can just take a shot and avoid it, because Johnson has the ability to put him out. The only thing I'm saying is if Anthony Johnson wasn't able to put Phil Davis out in the feet, even though he dominated that matchup, that's a little bit concerning against a guy who can probably match, if not surpass, his output levels. Gus needs to be busier in this matchup. He needs to be more diverse, use kicks, work from the outside, make Anthony Johnson chase him, and I think he does that. And my prediction is Alexander Gustafsson to defeat Anthony Rumble Johnson. I'll take the Mauler by a decision. So those are my 4 main card predictions for the upcoming UFC on Fox 14 event. All of the preliminary bouts will be posted as soon as possible at kamikazeoverdrive.net. Lots of fights and a short week with the last event coming on a Sunday and this one coming on a Saturday. The bet packs will be available as well. I've won money consistently, I think 4 of the last 5 shows, 5 out of the last 6. I can't tell you, but I've had a lot of success of late. So certainly consider jumping in there. Could have been a lot more. I'm still bent out of shape about that Sean Spencer fight because it cost me so much, it cost my bettors so much. It was, and even if it didn't cost any money, it's an atrocious decision that these judges need to be investigating. It sucks that it happened in Boston, where I've routinely cheered for the Bruins, and that sucks as well. And there's nothing you can do but move on. But still, it's hard to look at that and say, at least for the sport perspective, that was a joke. Either way, we have a lot of fighting coming up. Check out the new improvements on my website, and if you're interested in predicting Bellator fights, contact me. And as always, thank you very much for listening, guys.